I should have known better than to book the last hotel room in the city. It was the only option left, and I was desperate. Little did I know, that decision would change everything. The moment I walked through the hotel's grand entrance, I could feel it, the weight of something unknown, something dangerous. The lobby was dimly lit, and the air smelled faintly of expensive cologne and dust. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, but this definitely wasn't it. My shoes clicked against the marble floor as I approached the front desk. The clerk barely glanced up from his computer. "I'm sorry, miss," he said, "but your room has already been taken care of." Taken care of? Confused, I glanced around. The hotel had been fully booked, or so I thought. "What do you mean?" I asked. He smiled faintly, almost pitying, and pointed to a man standing near the elevators. I turned to see him, tall, dark-haired, with a presence that filled the room. He wore an immaculate black suit, his posture commanding attention without a word. He wasn't just any guest. He was someone who owned the room without asking, someone who owned this entire building with a quiet authority. Giovanni Romano. The name hit me like a bolt of lightning. Every instinct screamed at me to turn around and run. But it was too late. His gaze found mine, and in that instant, everything changed. "You're not going anywhere," he said, his voice smooth like velvet, but with an undeniable edge. The words weren't a request. They were a command. My heart raced, and I suddenly felt trapped, as though I had walked into the wrong story. "Excuse me," I stammered, my voice trembling despite my best efforts. "I booked this room. I need a place to stay." Giovanni's lips curled into a smirk. "You think this is just a hotel?" he asked, his eyes locking onto mine, intense and unwavering. "This is my city. Every corner, every room, every fate is mine to control." Panic surged in my chest. What kind of man was this? And why was he looking at me like I was already his? Before I could say another word, he motioned for the clerk to give me the key. "You'll stay in my room tonight," he declared, his voice final. "And your fate is already tied to mine." A chill ran down my spine. I didn't know what this man wanted, or what he was capable of, but I could feel the gravity of his words pulling me into his orbit. The clerk handed me the key, and I took it without thinking. What choice did I have? I followed Giovanni through the marble halls, my mind racing, my body betraying me with every step closer to him. What had I gotten myself into? Giovanni's presence was suffocating, and yet there was something oddly magnetic about it. As we walked through the corridor, the soft click of my heels echoed against the polished floor. His steps were silent, measured, but I could feel his gaze on me, burning with an intensity that made my heart race. Every inch of my body was alert, as though I were standing on the edge of a cliff, ready to fall into the unknown. The hallway felt longer than it should, the silence between us thick, as if the air itself was holding its breath. I couldn't understand why I wasn't running. Why wasn't I demanding to leave? I should have been terrified, but all I could think about was how impossible it was to ignore him, to stay unaffected by the weight of his every move. We reached the door to the suite. Giovanni unlocked it with a smooth motion, never once taking his eyes off me. The door swung open, revealing a lavish room that seemed too grand for an ordinary hotel. It wasn't just a suite, it was a command center, designed to make anyone who stepped inside feel insignificant in comparison. The large bed was draped in rich, dark linens, the kind that suggested wealth and control. The view from the windows was breathtaking, Manhattan laid out beneath us like a glittering expanse of concrete and glass. Giovanni stepped inside first, his eyes scanning the room with a sharpness that suggested he had been in far more intimidating places than this. "Make yourself comfortable," he said, though the words felt more like an order than an invitation. I hesitated, standing in the doorway, feeling the weight of his gaze still on me. What was this? What was happening? This wasn't just a random encounter, it couldn't be. I had no idea what kind of man Giovanni Romano was, but I knew he was someone who got what he wanted, no matter the cost. "I'm just here for the night," I said, trying to sound casual, even though every fiber of my being screamed for me to leave. Giovanni looked at me, his eyes narrowing slightly as if weighing my every word. "I know," he said, his voice low and controlled. "But things have a way of changing. You'll find that out soon enough." His words hung in the air, pregnant with meaning I couldn't quite grasp. "I'm not looking for trouble," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he walked further into the room, his movements fluid, almost predatory. There was something unnerving about the way he carried himself. He wasn't just a man, he was a force of nature, undeniable and inescapable. I watched him for a moment, my pulse quickening. "You're not in trouble," he said, finally turning to face me. "But you are now part of something you don't understand yet." His eyes were intense, but there was something else there, something that made my stomach flutter. It was power. Pure, unfiltered power. The kind that made you feel small and insignificant, but also captivated. "I don't know what you want from me," I said, stepping into the room, the door closing behind me with a soft click. Giovanni was silent for a moment, as if considering my question. "What I want," he began, his voice dropping even lower, "is for you to stay. For now." The words sent a chill through me, and I fought the urge to step back. I didn't know why I was still standing there, why I hadn't walked out yet. There was something about Giovanni that kept me rooted in place, something about him that I couldn't shake. "I'm not sure what this is," I said, my mind racing for some kind of explanation, but none came. Giovanni's lips curved into a slow, knowing smile. "You'll understand soon enough," he said. "But for now, rest. You've had a long day." There was no warmth in his suggestion, only the quiet certainty that whatever this was, I was in it now, whether I liked it or not. The room felt different now, the silence thicker than before, as though it had a weight all its own. I could feel Giovanni's presence like a shadow, always looming just behind me, even though he hadn't said anything for a while. I sat on the edge of the bed, my fingers clutching the soft fabric of the sheets, my mind racing with thoughts I couldn't quiet. What was happening? Why had I stayed? The room itself was both grand and imposing, like a palace built for someone who ruled with an invisible hand, and I was just a visitor in his domain, caught in a game I didn't understand. My thoughts were interrupted by Giovanni's voice, breaking through the thick silence. "You're wondering why you're here," he said, his tone steady, like he already knew what was going through my head. I didn't answer, not because I didn't want to, but because I couldn't find the right words. My eyes were fixed on the floor, trying to focus on anything other than the man who had somehow made himself a part of my night. "You think this is an accident," Giovanni continued, his words slow and deliberate, as if he were explaining something far too complicated for me to grasp in one go. "But nothing in my world is by chance. Not you, not this." His words were like a puzzle I couldn't solve, and yet there was a strange comfort in hearing them. He wasn't forcing anything. He wasn't demanding anything. But somehow, I could feel the pull of his power. "You're in my world now, Sophia," he added, his voice softer, but still laced with an unmistakable edge. The air between us thickened, the weight of his words pressing on me. I couldn't understand it, but somehow I wasn't afraid. Not really. There was something almost magnetic about him, like he could take control of everything around him with just a thought. I should have been terrified. I should have demanded to leave. But I didn't. The room seemed to close in around me, and I couldn't tell if it was the hotel's oppressive grandeur or something else entirely. Giovanni didn't move, didn't approach me, but I could feel his eyes on me, like he was waiting for something, waiting for me to say something, to do something. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said, finally breaking the silence again, but his words didn't comfort me. They only made the air feel heavier. "But you need to understand that when I say something, it happens. No one leaves my world once they enter." I swallowed hard, my mind trying to process everything he was saying, but nothing seemed to make sense. "I don't belong here," I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. Giovanni's lips twitched, just slightly, as if my words had amused him. "You're wrong," he replied, his gaze unwavering. "You do. And the sooner you accept that, the easier this will be." My heart pounded in my chest. How had I gotten here? How had I let myself get tangled in the web of a man like Giovanni Romano? I didn't know. But what I did know was that I couldn't walk away now, not when the pull of his presence was this strong. His eyes softened for a fraction of a second, but the intensity never fully left. "You'll understand soon enough," he said, his voice low and almost like a promise. but there was no comfort in it. Just a strange, undeniable certainty that, no matter what I did, I was already in deeper than I could ever have imagined. I could feel my breath catch in my throat as Giovanni remained silent, standing just a few feet away. The tension between us was palpable, thicker than the velvet curtains draping the windows, thicker than the cold air in the room. I didn't know what he wanted from me, but I could tell I was about to find out. The heavy silence weighed on me, suffocating, but I couldn't bring myself to break it. It felt like every word I spoke would make things worse, would put me deeper into this unknown world he had pulled me into. I looked down at my hands, fidgeting with the edges of the bedspread, trying to find something, anything, to focus on. Giovanni's voice broke through the quiet again, low and commanding. "You're still not understanding, are you?" The words hung in the air like a challenge. My heart raced, my mind a whirlwind of thoughts. "I understand," I said, more to myself than to him, but it sounded weak, even to my own ears. Giovanni stepped closer, and I couldn't help but stiffen. His presence was so overwhelming, so magnetic, that it was impossible to ignore. "No," he said softly, his voice a mixture of amusement and something darker, something unreadable. "You don't." I swallowed hard, meeting his gaze. His eyes were like steel, sharp, unyielding. "I don't have time for games," he continued. "You're here because I allowed it. And you're going to stay whether you like it or not." The finality in his voice sent a shiver down my spine. I tried to steady myself, but my heart was pounding in my chest. I wanted to leave, to escape the grip he had on me, but there was nowhere to run. Not from him. Not from this place. Giovanni's gaze softened slightly, though the intensity never fully left his eyes. "I know you're scared," he said, as if reading my thoughts. "But fear won't help you here." It was true. I was terrified, but somehow I couldn't look away from him. Every fiber of my being screamed for me to leave, to escape this suffocating hold he had on me, but my feet wouldn't move. "I'm not your prisoner," I finally said, though my voice shook. He smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. It was knowing, as if he already knew the answer. "No, you're not my prisoner," he said slowly. "But you will be mine." The weight of his words hit me like a freight train. I didn't know how to respond. I didn't know what to say, what to do. He was in control, and I was nothing but a pawn in whatever game he was playing. The thought should have terrified me. And it did, but there was something else, something I couldn't place. Maybe it was his presence, the power he exuded, the certainty in his every word and movement. Maybe it was the way he looked at me, as if he already knew everything about me, my fears, my doubts, my desires. I wasn't sure if I hated him or if I was drawn to him. Maybe both. "Relax," Giovanni said, his voice softer now. "I'm not going to hurt you. Not yet." The promise in his words made my stomach tighten, and for the first time since I'd stepped into this room, I felt a sense of relief. It wasn't much, but it was something. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Giovanni stepped back, his eyes never leaving mine. "I want you to stay, Sophia," he said, his voice low, almost intimate. "I want you to understand what you've gotten yourself into. And I want you to learn how to survive in my world." His world. The thought was chilling. But it was also irresistible. Somehow I knew that I would never be the same after tonight. I didn't know how I had gotten here, and I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew I couldn't turn back. Giovanni was right about one thing: nothing in his world was by chance. Not even me. The room felt like it was closing in on me. Giovanni was still watching me, his gaze never faltering, always intense, always measuring. I couldn't get comfortable, no matter how I tried. The bed beneath me was soft, too soft, but I couldn't relax. I felt restless, like something big was about to happen, something I wasn't prepared for. I shifted on the bed, crossing my arms tightly over my chest. Giovanni had been right about one thing: fear wasn't going to help me now. It wasn't that I didn't feel scared, I did. It was just that fear was no longer enough to make me run. Something inside me was holding me here, keeping me tethered to this room, to this man. I had no idea what it was. Maybe it was his presence, that quiet command in everything he did. Maybe it was the way he made me feel like I was the only person in the world when he looked at me. Maybe it was because I knew deep down that I wasn't going anywhere. Giovanni stood by the window now, his hands clasped behind his back, looking out at the city below. I couldn't help but watch him, the way the faint light from the streetlights cast shadows across his face, making him look even more imposing, even more untouchable. I wanted to ask him so many things. Why me? What did he want from me? But I knew I wouldn't get answers unless he was ready to give them. "You're quiet," Giovanni said, his voice low, almost thoughtful. "Thinking about what you want?" I shook my head, though I wasn't sure if it was the truth. I didn't know what I wanted anymore. "I don't even know what I'm supposed to do," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. Giovanni turned, his gaze locking with mine. There was something in his eyes, something almost sympathetic, but it was quickly replaced by that same unreadable intensity. "You don't need to do anything. Not yet. Just stay. Just be." His words sent a shiver through me. Stay. I wasn't sure I even had a choice. "And if I want to leave?" I asked, my voice thick with emotion, though I wasn't sure what kind of emotion it was. Giovanni's lips quirked, but his expression was serious. "You won't," he said simply. The confidence in his words made my heart race. I opened my mouth to say something, but no words came. What could I say? How could I argue when everything he said felt true? "I know what you're thinking," Giovanni continued, his tone softer now. "You think you can walk away from me. But you're already here. You're already mine." The words hit me like a jolt of electricity. Mine. I didn't know how to process them. What did that even mean? "I don't belong to anyone," I said quickly, the words escaping before I could stop them. Giovanni stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. "That's where you're wrong," he said quietly, his voice almost a whisper now. "You do belong to me. And the sooner you accept that, the easier this will be for both of us." The weight of his words was heavy, like a truth I wasn't ready to face. But there it was, hanging in the air between us, undeniable. He wasn't asking me to stay. He was telling me I had no choice. The thought sent a rush of panic through me. But at the same time, I felt something else, something deeper, something that was starting to make sense in a way I couldn't explain. I didn't know how to react. I didn't know how to feel. All I knew was that this wasn't just about the room or the city or Giovanni. This was about something far bigger than I was ready for. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to fight it or give in. The silence in the room was deafening, but I could feel Giovanni's presence like a constant hum at the back of my mind. I couldn't ignore it, no matter how hard I tried. My heart was still racing, a mix of panic and something else that I couldn't quite place. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was fear. Or maybe it was just the realization that my life was no longer mine to control. Giovanni had made it clear that I wasn't going anywhere, that I belonged to him now. The thought didn't sit well with me, but as much as I hated it, there was a part of me that couldn't deny the pull he had on me. His power, his calm, unwavering control, everything about him demanded attention, and I couldn't help but feel drawn to it. He moved across the room with that same deliberate, calculated grace, and I found myself watching him without even realizing it. He wasn't just a man. He was a force of nature, something bigger than anything I had ever encountered. "You're quiet tonight," Giovanni said, breaking the silence once more, his voice smooth, like he was speaking to someone who had no choice but to listen. "I'm just trying to process everything," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Giovanni paused and turned to face me, his dark eyes piercing through me. "There's nothing to process, Sophia. You're here now. This is your life." His words hit me like a wave, and for a moment, I felt like I was drowning in them. This was my life. He was right. I was trapped in this world of his, and there was no escaping it. "I never asked for this," I said, my voice shaky, though I wasn't sure if I was talking to him or to myself. Giovanni's expression softened, just slightly. "You didn't have to ask for it," he said quietly. "You were always meant to be here." The certainty in his voice sent another chill down my spine. "What do you want from me?" I asked, the question slipping out before I could stop it. Giovanni didn't answer immediately. He walked closer to me, each step measured, calculated, until he was standing just a few feet away. "I want you to stop fighting it," he said, his voice low, almost soothing. I want you to accept what's happening between us. The air between us felt thick, charged with something I couldn't define. I wanted to step back, to run, but I couldn't move. His gaze held me in place, steady and unyielding. Why? I whispered, my voice cracking with the weight of everything I didn't understand. Giovanni's eyes softened again, just for a moment, and I saw something in them that I hadn't expected: vulnerability. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by that same calm, cold certainty. Because I've already made up my mind, he said. You're staying here. With me. Whether you want to or not. The words hung in the air between us, thick with finality. I couldn't deny the truth in them. I couldn't deny the pull he had on me, the way everything in this room, in this world, seemed to revolve around him. And if I don't? I asked, almost daring him to give me an answer, to tell me I still had a choice. Giovanni smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of someone who already knew the answer. You don't have a choice, he said softly. Not anymore. His words were like a quiet declaration, a finality that I couldn't argue with. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but no words came. What could I say? What could I possibly say that would change anything now? Giovanni stepped closer, closing the distance between us, his presence overwhelming, and I realized then that I had already made my choice. Whether I wanted to admit it or not, I was already in his world, tangled in his web, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to escape. But at that moment, I wasn't sure I wanted to either. I stood there, rooted to the spot, as Giovanni's words hung in the air like a thick fog, wrapping around me, suffocating me in their certainty. He was right. I had no choice. There was no escape from this. But a part of me, the part that still clung to the hope of freedom, to the belief that I could take control of my life, refused to accept it. The room was too quiet, the tension between us palpable, like the calm before a storm. Giovanni was still close, but his presence felt even more overwhelming now, like a storm I could feel gathering just on the edge of my consciousness. I wanted to speak, to shout, to demand answers, but nothing came out. My breath caught in my throat as his eyes never left me, studying me, reading me like a book he had already memorized. You're afraid, Giovanni said, his voice soft but firm, the words laced with an understanding that chilled me to my core. You don't have to be. I won't hurt you. Not yet. His eyes softened for just a fraction of a second, and for a brief moment, I saw something that resembled care, or maybe just the ghost of it. But it disappeared as quickly as it had come, replaced by the same cold, unwavering confidence. I'm not afraid, I lied, trying to steady my shaking hands. The words came out flat, almost hollow, and I hated myself for them. Giovanni took a step forward, closing the gap between us just enough that I could feel his presence in every part of the room. His gaze never wavered, his expression unreadable. You're lying, he said simply, his voice low, almost amused. And that's okay. You'll learn soon enough. I wanted to argue, to fight, to scream that I wasn't ready for this, that I didn't want any part of this world. But no words came. Instead, I stood there, frozen, my thoughts running wild, my mind racing with 1,000 questions I couldn't answer. I felt trapped, not just in the room but in this situation, in this life I had somehow found myself tangled in. Giovanni didn't seem to mind the silence. He was patient, waiting for me to process everything, waiting for me to accept it. I wasn't sure how much time passed before he spoke again, but it felt like hours. You can't change this, he said, his voice steady, like he was explaining something simple, something inevitable. You belong to me now, whether you like it or not. I wanted to scream, to tell him that I wasn't his to claim, that I wasn't a possession. But deep down, I knew he was right. I had no control here. I was already in his world, a world that had swallowed me whole without me even realizing it. What do you want from me? I whispered, my voice barely audible, as though speaking louder might shatter the fragile hold I had on my composure. Giovanni's expression shifted, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something softer, almost like a hint of pity. I want you to trust me, he said quietly. I want you to understand that everything I'm doing is for a reason. And eventually, you'll see that I'm the only one who can protect you. His words were like a dagger to my chest, but there was something in them, something I couldn't ignore. Maybe it was the way he spoke, the conviction in his voice, or maybe it was the way he looked at me like he was the only one who knew what was best for me. I didn't know. All I knew was that I couldn't fight him. I couldn't fight this. The realization hit me like a wave, knocking me off balance, and for the first time, I wondered if maybe I wasn't meant to escape. Maybe somehow I was meant to be here. "I'm not ready for this," I said, my voice trembling. Giovanni's expression softened again, just a little, and he stepped closer, his gaze never leaving mine. "You don't have to be," he said, his voice almost gentle. "But you will be. In time." The words lingered in the air, hanging between us like a promise, and something deep inside me stirred. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know where this would lead. But as I stood there, looking into Giovanni's eyes, I realized something. I wasn't sure I cared anymore. I woke up to the sound of the city outside, the hum of traffic mixing with the distant noise of voices, and I realized that somehow I had fallen asleep. The soft sheets tangled around me felt unfamiliar, but it was the feeling of his presence that lingered in the room, even though Giovanni was nowhere to be seen. I tried to push the thoughts away, but they clung to me like a heavy weight. My mind raced, replaying everything he had said to me, everything I had felt. It was like a storm inside me, confusion and fear swirling with something else, something deeper that I couldn't quite name. I had never been good at letting go, but somehow, with Giovanni, I felt like I was already slipping. The room was quiet, but there was an undercurrent of tension that I couldn't shake. I could feel the walls closing in, as though they were watching me, waiting for me to make a choice. I glanced around the room, taking in the lavish surroundings. The same ones that made me feel trapped, but also somehow protected. Giovanni had told me I was safe with him, that he was the only one who could protect me. The thought should have scared me, but instead, it made me feel something else. I couldn't explain it, but I didn't want to be alone anymore. The thought of leaving felt impossible now. Giovanni had already claimed a part of me, whether I wanted it or not. And I wasn't sure if I could ever take it back. The door opened softly, and I looked up to find Giovanni standing in the doorway, his eyes already on me. His presence filled the room instantly, like he was the very air I breathed. "I see you're awake," he said, his voice calm, almost too calm, as if nothing in the world could rattle him. I wanted to say something, anything, to break the silence that stretched between us, but my throat felt tight, the words stuck. He walked into the room without hesitation, his gaze never leaving mine. The distance between us seemed to shrink with every step he took, and I could feel the tension in the air like static, ready to snap. "I didn't expect you to be so quiet," he said, his lips curling into a slight smile. "You've always been so full of questions." I didn't respond, though I couldn't stop my thoughts from racing. Questions? I had so many. But each time I opened my mouth, they seemed to die in my throat. He wasn't wrong, though. I had been full of questions the moment I walked into this strange world of his. But now, it felt like I was losing my grip on everything. Giovanni sat down beside me, his presence overwhelming, and for the first time, I felt the weight of everything that had happened in the last few days crash down on me. "You're not sure what to think," he said, as if reading my mind. "You're scared, and that's okay. But I'm not here to hurt you, Sophia." His voice was low and steady, like a promise. But it didn't comfort me. It only made my confusion grow deeper. "Why me?" I finally managed to ask, my voice barely more than a whisper. Giovanni's eyes softened, though his expression remained controlled. "Because you're already mine," he said simply, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. "You always have been." The words were heavy, like a chain I couldn't escape, and I felt myself pulling away from him, even though I knew I couldn't run. I couldn't leave this room, couldn't escape him, no matter how hard I tried. "I don't belong to anyone," I said, the words escaping before I could stop them. Giovanni's gaze didn't waver. "You do now," he replied, his voice firm but not unkind. "And you'll understand why soon enough." I didn't know what that meant, but I felt it deep in my bones. Giovanni was right about one thing: I wasn't leaving. Not now, not ever. Whether I liked it or not, I was trapped in his world. And the worst part? I didn't know if I wanted to leave anymore. I could feel the weight of Giovanni's words pressing down on me, but I couldn't find a way to push back. He was right. I wasn't leaving. Not now. Not ever. The realization hit me harder than I expected. It was as if everything I thought I knew about myself had been wiped away, replaced by the fact that I was now part of his world, bound to him in ways I couldn't fully understand. The room felt colder now, the air heavier, and yet, somehow, I didn't feel completely trapped. There was something about Giovanni's presence that kept me grounded, even as I was losing control. I had always prided myself on being independent, on never letting anyone dictate my life. But Giovanni had stripped that away from me without even trying. I was still here, still sitting next to him, and I couldn't quite understand why. He hadn't threatened me. He hadn't raised his voice. And yet, I felt like I was being slowly pulled into his orbit, unable to resist. "You don't have to be afraid," Giovanni said, breaking the silence again. His voice was calm, like he was speaking to a child, yet there was no mistaking the power behind his words. "You're safe with me." I wanted to tell him that I wasn't afraid, but that would have been a lie. I was scared of losing myself, scared of what was happening between us, and scared of the power he held over me. But at the same time, a part of me didn't want to fight it. Part of me wanted to believe him. Part of me wanted to trust him, even though I knew I shouldn't. "I don't know how to trust you," I said, my voice small, barely audible. Giovanni looked at me, his gaze intense, as if he was searching for something in me. "You don't have to trust me right away," he said quietly. "But you will. In time." His words were strangely comforting, and I hated myself for feeling comforted. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice shaking. Giovanni leaned back in his chair, his eyes never leaving mine. "Now, you stay with me. You learn how this works." I didn't understand what that meant, but the way he said it made it feel inevitable. "What if I don't want to learn?" I asked, though I knew the answer before he spoke. Giovanni's lips curved into a small smile, one that was almost too calm. "Then you'll learn the hard way," he said, his voice low, but there was no threat in it. It was simply the truth. "But you're not going anywhere. You belong to me now." His words were like a chain, heavy and unbreakable, and I could feel myself being pulled deeper into his world. I didn't know how to get out. I didn't know if I even wanted to. Giovanni stood up, walking slowly towards the window, his back to me for a moment. "You don't have to understand it all right now," he said, his voice soft, but with a finality that left no room for argument. "But you will. Soon enough." I wanted to say something, anything to make sense of what was happening, but I couldn't. All I could do was sit there, frozen, as he turned back to face me, his eyes dark and